despite $30 to $40 billion of investment in AI by enterprises, up to 95% of organizations, they generate zero return on their investment. It's not meager return. It's literally zero return. And today, I'm going to talk about why that is and what you can do to be in the 5%. So this statistic has been floating around in LinkedIn and Twitter, and I've seen this in Fortune. I'm sure many of you have heard of this. Has anybody actually read the MIT study that's behind this statistic? Anyone? Yeah, so that's what I expected. I have read those 26 pages. And today, I want to share with you the findings of that report. And then I'm going to call on stage somebody who is in that 5% so that we can all learn from him. This is that study. In fact, I had to dig it up. It's not easily findable on the internet. It says State of AI Business in 2025, the Gen AI Divide. It's done by, the lead is Ramesh Raskar, who is MIT's lead and founder of Project Nanda, which stands for Networked Agents and Decentralized Architecture. So this is an organization that deeply researches agents and their impact on business and on society at large. So this is not an opinion piece. This is not a thought leadership article. This is not somebody's opinion. Right? This is primary research. 300+ publicly disclosed AI projects were studied and reviewed. More than 52 organizations with structured interviews were interviewed, and 153 senior leaders were interviewed. So this is still the most rigorous study on the impact of AI in business, even though it's about a year old. And they asked a few questions that CHROs and CIOs regularly ask us. Why do AI projects stall? What causes it? And what are the small number of winning organizations doing differently? Anybody wants to learn? Awesome. So let's talk about that. MIT actually has a specific term for this. They say this is the Gen AI divide. On the wrong side of the divide are the 95% of the organizations that have the AI tools. They have the AI pilots. They have the talent, the technology, the budget, and yet they are able to generate zero returns out of their investment. They have some productivity gains at the margins for the individuals, but no structural transformation. On the right side of the divide are those 5% of organizations that have production systems that use AI, that have embedded AI in production workflows, that use AI that learns and adapts, and they are generating millions in returns. So let's take a look at the data a little bit more deeply. If you look at the top funnel, the general purpose LLMs, these are ChatGPTs of the world, right? The funnel looks pretty reasonable. For example, 80% of the organizations investigated, 50% of them piloted, and 40% of them put them in production. So it looks reasonable, right? But the problem with this is that these general purpose LLMs did not produce any structural fundamental change in the business that will generate returns. If you look at the enterprise AI tools that are supposed to transform the business and generate revenue or result in savings, the funnel collapses. So 60% of the organizations investigated them. Only 20% reached pilot stage, and only 5% reached production. The users said the tools were brittle, over-engineered, and they didn't fit the workflows. One of the CIOs said that they've seen lots of AI demos. Only one or two tools are worth investigating. The rest are just wrappers or science projects. They uncovered 5 myths that I want to share with you. Myth number 1, AI will replace jobs very soon. In fact, there was no consensus. The reality is no consensus among the AI leaders on the impact of AI in hiring. Myth number 2, Gen AI is transforming business. The reality is transformation is rare. In 7 out of 9 sectors that were reviewed, there was no structural change due to AI. Myth number 3, employees or enterprises are slow to adopt AI. The reality is adoption is not the challenge. Myth number 4, and this starts to get to the root cause. The myth is that the blockers or the legal teams or the data and privacy concerns or the model quality. The reality is the blockers are actually the learnability and adaptability of the AI tools, and we'll get into that a little bit more detail. And myth number 5 is that the best enterprises build their own tools. The reality is, if you build it from scratch yourself, it's more likely to fail. And this is what the MIT study calls the learning gap. The users who are using these tools for business transformation, they are saying, it doesn't learn from our feedback. Too much manual context required every time. I cannot customize it to my workflows. And they are saying that it breaks in edge cases, and it does not adapt. So the real breaker is that 2 things. 1, it does not learn, does not have memory. And 2, it does not adapt to the workflows that are already present in the enterprise. It asks the enterprise to adapt to AI. So now I'm going to talk about 2 slides on what the winning enterprises are doing. So this is slide number 1, which is from the vendor's perspective. And the next slide will be from the buyer's perspective, which is all of you. The reason I'm showing both perspectives is that really successful enterprises work in a partnership between vendors and customers. So what are the 5% of vendors doing differently? 3 things. 1, they go narrow and deep rather than broad and shallow. They identify one use case, they apply AI to it, transform that use case with AI, and then go to another use case. Number 2, the tools are built for learning. So the tool learns from the enterprise over time and adapts. MIT study says that these vendors who are extracting millions in value, they are actually on the top right quadrant, where one axis is learning and memory, the other axis is customization. So they are high learning, high customization tools. And number 3, product quality is important. It is necessary, but it's not sufficient. These vendors that are winning, they are winning on trust. So most of the CIOs and CHROs say that I don't just depend on the product demo. I want to see it, and I want to see it in use from my peers. And what are the 5% of organizations, of customers like yourself, doing differently? If I have to describe that in 2 sentences, it would be this. These customers are not acting as software customers. These customers are acting as BPO clients. Let me break it down. Number 1, they're saying the study showed that they buy versus build. So now this, because the study was conducted a year ago, maybe this dynamic shifts a little bit with announcements like Talent Forge. Companies buy and build, and they do a partnership. But the fact is, the study showed that if you build from scratch, it's more likely to fail. Number 2, customers empower their line managers. These are the people who are frontline staff, and these are the people who the MIT study calls prosumers. These are the people who have done a lot of the testing, and they use ChatGPT and Claude Cowork and Claude Code in their day-to-day lives. And these are the people who do bottoms-up sourcing, rather than an AI center of excellence doing the sourcing of the tools. So the bottoms-up sourcing, combined with the exec-level accountability, is the formula for success. It beats AI centers of excellence every time. Number 3, they measure outcomes. They measure operational outcomes, like a BPO client. So this reminded me, my brother works for a BPO company, and one of his clients is Kroger, the grocery and pharmacy chain. When my brother and his team are building a product, they don't build a product then that gets customized by the client. They build a product for the client. It's highly customized. It is only meant for that client. That's the kind of, and the outcomes are measured in operational outcomes. Right? And last, they find ROI where others don't. So despite 50% of the budget going to front office operations like sales and marketing, the actual savings are in back office operations. For example, the BPO elimination, $2 to $10 million saved annually. Agency spend 30% less, and risk management $1 million saved. So that's the roadmap, that's the future, that's what the winning customers and vendors are doing differently. Now, let me welcome to stage somebody who is in the 5%. In his own words, he's on the journey to 5%, but I believe he is. Please welcome Fernando from Kraft Heinz. Welcome.
How are you? Thank you.
Before we dive into your journey of being in the 5%, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. First, thanks for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here and Cultivate. So my name is Fernando. I'm the VP for Digital Solutions and Delivery for Kraft Heinz. I think a simple way to understand what we do is kind of an orchestrator under this HIO, leading technology, global operations, product management, and trying to build the future of work with the company. I've been with them for 7 years. I started in Brazil, and I'm very happy to be here today.
Awesome. So Fernando has a very interesting background. Can you tell the audience a little bit about how many countries you've lived in?
Yeah. I've been living in, I left Brazil 20 years ago. Since then, I had the opportunity to live in 7 different countries.
Wow.
US, I was in Dubai before coming here, Mexico, Belgium, and Canada. So it has been a long journey.
So most continents covered, I think Asia, you covered that, Africa, and Antarctica.
Yeah, you can count like the Gulf region, kind of close, but not Africa, not Oceania. So, you know, food for thought, Rodolfo, for my next move. Think about that. So.
Awesome. So let's talk about Kraft Heinz and your journey. So Kraft Heinz grew as a collection of independent companies, you mentioned, right? So 45+ countries, each with their own technology stack. That's a lot of complexity. And so when you looked at that landscape and you decided that you're going to build HR 5.0, right? What was your honest assessment that you made about where you're starting from? What made you decide to leapfrog rather than just catch up with AI?
Yeah. No, for sure. First, HR 5.0 is the name of the project that we gave inside the company on our ambition to pioneer the future of HR. Right? And this ambition has been there for many years. I remember I have 7 years or 6 years working in the company, and I think for the last 5, there was always a thought and something about it. And to be honest, we never took a lot of time or dedicated enough resource to do that, right? So even when I got the call to come to this project, I said, I'm not sure, because it has been something we always left as a second priority. I think what helped this to become true, I think were 3 things. First, a very good momentum with our company, right? In the sense that at that moment we had a new CEO who was really trying to set a 10-year vision, that allowed us to understand which type of company we need to be successful. So we had that sponsorship there. I think the second part of this was a good momentum in the industry, right? I think when I started my career 20 years ago, 20-something years ago, I remember the revolution that the internet brought to HR, to the way we were working. And I believe with AI, we are in an even more transformational moment. Right? So I think the combination of those 2 things enable us to go back to our priorities and say, I think that's the right time to really work and transform our ambition to pioneer the future of HR into a plan and our path to get there. So we are on this journey for 1.5 years, almost 2 years. Has been a great one and a lot of learnings on that journey as well.
Great. You mentioned you evaluated 160 vendors. That's a lot of vendors. And you mentioned talent acquisition alone, you had like 20+, right?
Yeah.
Now, the study that we just talked about, it said that trust, deep workflow understanding, and not features is what actually drives value, right? What was the decisive factor that made Eightfold the right partner for you?
Yeah. This was one of the most complicated decisions that we had to take. When we started this journey, again, we didn't look to one specific function or pillar within HR. We tried to look to the company as a whole. And then we started to think first on building the right ecosystem. Right? So I think part of our decisions about who should be our best partners was based on how can we make this experience as good as possible and as integrated as possible. Right? So we went from a lot of vendors, let's find the 3 or 4 that made a lot of sense to us. I think the second part of this was also finding partners who have the same ambition and share similar values that we had. And I think here on this AI journey, one of the most interesting things is that not necessarily what you did in the last 10 years or finding companies with a very strong track record will be the best companies for your next year. So trying to find that combination of companies or partners who had the expertise but also had a long way to go was very important. And I believe the last one was really who was willing to invest with us on this journey. Again, we were talking about ROI. It's not an easy game, right? I think we were talking about it before. I'm not sure if you're on that 5% that really found the ROI, but within this transformation, we found good pockets of money that allow us to invest. So finding the right partners with the mindset that fit on our ecosystem and that share the same ambition and values that we had was a very important part of the decision. That's why we came to Eightfold.
Right. So let's talk about the enterprise wall. Right? We just heard 95% of the enterprise tools don't make it to production, right? So because of many reasons, like brittle workflows and so on. You went live in February across 45 countries with over 1,000 applicants a day.
Yeah.
So what was the moment that could have stopped you, and what did you do differently to push through?
Yeah. I would like to mention 2 moments. I think the moment number 1 was the moment of truth when we put together the business case, because having this ambition to pioneer the future of HR, to fix everything, sounds great, but when you make the numbers, they are pretty scary, especially in a company like our size. So I believe the first moment was when we build the business case, and now we have to convince the organization to invest on that, right? And I believe the way we unlock this, and I like what you said on your presentation, is we did not necessarily fund this transformation through a very sexy, efficient AI play. We are funding it from improvement with our hourly workers, right? So we found that I think having that ability to get money from one pocket and invest in the other one was super important. So I think the first big moment for us was that, and to get the trust of the organization, to get the right logic, to connect it with the company strategy as well. So to me, that was the first big moment. The second one was in September last year. We were 6 months down the road with implementation, and we got the news that we were splitting the company in 2. And the message across the company was, stop everything. Every project, everything that you're doing for the future needs to stop, because we all need to focus on getting these companies separated and everything. I remember at that moment having a conversation with our CHRO, and he said, Fernando, there's one thing that we're not going to stop, is HR 5.0, because it doesn't matter, we need to create 2 great companies, and 2 great companies, they require that solid foundations in HR, so you guys move forward. So to me, it was a very reassuring moment, that how connected this was, how important it was. Luckily, now we are not splitting the companies anymore. Yeah. So for now, so we put our efforts to continue our journey. So these were to me the 2 big moments that made a big difference.
Great. You mentioned that one of the 4 things that puts an organization in the 5%, right, who succeed in finding the right use case. Talent acquisition seems almost purpose-built based on the use case, because you match skills, qualification, requirements at scale. How did you know that talent acquisition was the right first use case for Kraft Heinz specifically? And what does success look like for you now that it's live?
Yeah. I think one of I think AI brings so many possibilities that's very easy to get lost, right? To get excited about different opportunities. And I think since the beginning of the project, we tried to create a clear North Star, an anchor of where we believe we should be looking at or targeting when we are going through these decisions and these moments, right? And at that moment, we decided that two things were really, really impacted by AI and scalable, and we had a clear use case. One was all the process about inquiry management. So what ChatGPT was doing was there. So how can we create the same experience to our employees that they can interact with a bot, like they interact with you know, an HR person? And the second one was talent acquisition. And here there were a couple of reasons. I think first, when we stopped to check where our HR team was spending most of their time, it was in talent acquisition. Doing interviews, scheduling, you know, candidates, assessing CVs, all that was one of the biggest, you know, areas where our HR team. So the second part of this is looking in the market and saying, hey, do we have partners? Do we have technology? Do we have companies that are already solving that problem in a scalable way? So it comes back to my point on finding the right partner. So that's why talent acquisition became such a clear use case for us. Our HR team was spending a lot of time there, and we saw in the market that we had the right momentum. And I believe what we're trying to achieve is we're trying now to get all the value that we thought we could get by using AI for our process. We are 4 months down the road, and we had our first meeting with Eightfold, I think 1 month ago. And I remember Brad and Christine asking me, hey, what do you want to see? And our answer is, you tell us what we should see. How our company became better because we now use Eightfold. And I remember one of the main KPIs that we started to look is we had, if I'm not mistaken, 5% of candidates self-booking their interviews. Said, great, we need to get this number to 80% because booking interviews is one of the most time-consuming and low-added value tasks of our HR team. So trying to find that KPIs was very interesting, and I believe that we are in a good path to get there.
Great. So let's talk about the organizational reality, right? Beyond the tech. The dominant barrier we saw is not just technology. Everyone has access to the same models that are improving. It's org design, it's about learning, workflows, who makes the decisions. So how did you structure the ownership so that HR, IT, and legal were partners in the journey and not a wall at the end?
Yeah, I think now that's one of the biggest unlocks of this transformation was to really create the right ecosystem and assemble parts of the organization that were not necessarily working as one team and put this all together, right? And I think that the way we did that, it was through, first, on our tech team, we sourced a lot of that capabilities that in the past we were outsourcing with vendors. So we were losing a lot of the knowledge. So in sourcing our technology team was a very important move.
Okay.
I think the second very important move was to create a product organization within HR. So we started to operate with the product mindset. We changed our ways of working to a more agile delivery. So doing that was a second big unlock. Third one was to create a user experience team that we didn't have before. We were very top-down approach. Hey, you have to use this tool. Good luck with the experience. You know, it's a top-down. Now we are trying to bring that perspective as well, right? We cannot abuse from the fact that employees have no choice. So what are we doing to make their lives better, right? I think that was another one. Legal has been always a challenge, right? In the beginning, we have all these GDPR issues, how can we make sure the data is secure? But I believe that as we evolved on this journey, and they were part of it since the beginning, and they saw that we were also choosing, they were part of the choice of which partners we were choosing, I think this gave us a lot of credibility, and now we see them as a big partner for us, you know? So I think this has been a big unlock, assembling the right organization and the people with the same perspective and goal was a very important unlock for this transformation.
And you were talking about pods, right? So
yeah.
Getting different people together. So great. Last question. people in this room who are still experimenting. They have lots of pilots. They haven't put anything into production. What's the single most important decision that they need to make differently? This is not a technology decision, but rather a leadership decision.
Yeah, I think the most important decision is to put your money behind your goals. Right? I think one of the difference before I came to this position, or this was not that one of the reasons why we could not scale this in the past is because this was just words on a PowerPoint. We want to pioneer the future of HR. We want to be an admired company, but we want to invest $5 per year. I don't know if this is familiar, this type of challenge, but I think one of the big changes that we had from this HRO at that time was Melissa. She said, let's go. We're really going to, and she moved, remember on that, the day before, the famous meeting where we had to present to our CEO our use case, our CFO kind of challenging, guys, what are you going to do with all this money, all this CapEx? She gave a call to him and said, we have to do it, right? Because otherwise we won't be able to compete. Our company will become obsolete. So I think the most important decision that we took at that time was to put money behind our dream. And this allowed us to find better partners, to hire great people that are now in the company that were not the case in the past. And this is a big unlock for the transformation. So I'm very happy with that we took that decision.
Awesome. Thank you, Fernando. Thank you.
Thank you.
Big round of applause for Fernando.
Thank you.